Good evening. Um, it's 28 days of self-love affirmation. I started this last year and I did it in the morning. This year, I'm going to do it in the evening because I got the idea from a lady I was in Clubhouse with. She does it with her listeners. And so she does an affirmation and then a journal prompt at the end of the day with her listeners, and so that they can wind down from their day. I'm hoping to be able to give that as a gift to you. So I won't be long-winded. I'm going to start out by giving you the self-love affirmation for today, and then a bit of sound bowl, and then a journal prompt for the evening. And I'll share a very brief story. Okay. So the self-love affirmation for today is: I am both a masterpiece and a work in progress. I exist in both spaces peacefully. Again, I am both a masterpiece and a work in progress. I exist in both spaces peacefully. I'm going to talk to you about give you a little story about that at the end, about how I personally had to learn how to navigate my self-love affirmations because of some learned behavior patterns. Okay, so here's the sound bowl. I'll give you a sample of what it sounds like. That's the sound. I do 3 pounds on the sound bowl, and then I end it with I circle around it. I don't know the term. I need to look that up. I don't get into the details, and that's deliberate. That used to be a very big deal for me. Okay, so 3 gongs, and then I'll wind out with a circle around. I am both a masterpiece and a work in progress. I exist in both spaces peacefully. Our journal prompt for tonight will be: what spaces did I exist in today? You don't have to remember every space you existed in today. You don't have to remember all of the spaces you existed in today. Whatever makes you comfortable, whatever you feel like you want to write about, that's what's important. A little bit of story time. For me, learning to exist in both and was very difficult. I had lived for so long in definitive areas, even though they weren't definitive. I needed them to be. And so when they weren't, that was very difficult for me. I had to have some measure of control in order to not feel anxious about it. So I spent a lot of my time making sure things were perfect, making sure my desk was set up perfectly before I left the office for the day. I wanted everything in place when I came in, rushing in the morning from dropping the kids off into the office and, navigating the parking and getting in the elevator and getting to my desk. I wanted everything set up. My coffee cup was set up exactly where I reach out to grab it so that I could come in, pick it up, go get my coffee, come back, sit down at my desk, and I start working. I wouldn't even turn my monitor off or my PC off. I wanted it to be where I can just log right in, go back in, relog into the systems, and just get my day going. And I lived that way for a long time. Everything was prepared. I lived that way with my children. And that, as a child, that is a very difficult way to live because it creates a perfectionist, right? There's no room for error. And so you don't exist in your childhood, in your childness. And so I had to trace that back for myself and for my mom, who instilled that system within me, and my grandma instilled it within her. And more than likely, my great-grandmother instilled it into my grandmother, because I looked back that far at how their homes were kept, just immaculate. Everything had to be done, no dust anywhere. We had to vacuum every day, move the sofas. So everything was always immaculate. Car, everything. Yard had to be well manicured. Not that that's a bad thing, but I'm trying to give you an idea of how this goes on, and it starts and it rolls, steamrolls through generations. I realized that there was a different quality of life on the other side of both ends. And that was the most liberating thing for me. It did not happen immediately. I won't tell you that it was some microwave result in my work that I started doing the work and immediately, oh, this is a new way to do things. Let's do that. I can be honest with you and tell you, to this day, I still struggle with it. It's still a pump your brakes moment for me to regroup myself and say, oh, no, we don't have to be definitive in where we are or what we're feeling. And I don't even have to give a label to it right now. I can just let myself feel this, right? And for those of us, I'm a person who lives with anxiety. I struggle with depression. And so for those of us who live in those dualities, we, have to do extra work in order to, keep ourselves calm, keep ourselves in a space of neutrality. And so for me, that neutrality came down to, if I can't name it right now, I'm not going to spend more time on it. I can either go into my notes in my phone, or I can write it in my little notepad, and I can come back to it later. And I can say, at lunchtime today, I didn't feel well. I don't know what happened. I just took a nosedive. And there was something wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I couldn't name. The feeling I was having at the time, I just couldn't name it. And so I write that down. And at the end of my day, if I have the energy, because you have permission to not process a darn thing, you can get into your bed and deal with it tomorrow. Especially right now with what we're going through with the pandemic and just the climate that we live in right now. And if you're working outside the home and in a environment that is not conducive for your mental health, right? It can be difficult. And so if you don't feel like hashing through it that evening, you've written it down, you've made a note of it, you got all week. If you don't ever feel like going back to it, don't go back to it either. That's okay too. So I just want to end off the video with the self-affirmation we had for today, and that is, I am both a masterpiece and a work in progress, and I exist in both spaces peacefully. The journal prompt is, what spaces did I exist in today? And I wish you a good evening, and hopefully I'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night.